is Malvina King and I'm director at Sigma Recruitment, and I have a pleasure of bringing yet another fantastic speaker to you all, and a very, very topical subject. We're talking about mission, moon and space. So we're going to be talking now fittingly about really working from anywhere and how that should be our future from here onwards. Our guest speaker today actually was heavily researching work from anywhere and all remote work way before COVID pandemic started. He essentially spoke to many organizations that allow employees work from anywhere, and is here with us today to share the results of his research. Welcome Raj Choudhury, who is an assistant professor at Harvard Business School and a worldwide thought leader on work from anywhere. Raj, welcome to Talent Summit.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. So, Professor, you studied everything work related in terms of remoteness and different setups. Most of our delegates today experienced work from home. You looked at the next level of this, work from anywhere. So tell us all, really, what is the difference, first of all, and then how work from anywhere can become a vital part of business strategies for businesses everywhere?
Sure. So in work from home, the typical model is that the employee is working from home 2 or 3 days a week, but then still going to a physical office for the rest of the week.
Sure.
In work from anywhere, now you are additionally allowing the employee to pack her bags and relocate to a different town, city, or maybe even country. So conceptually, work from home gives the employee some control over her time. Like there's less commute, you can work when you want to. In work from anywhere, you are giving the employee additionally the control over geography, where you want to live. Sure. Now, I can talk all day about why this is good for people, for workers, but let me make the business case for why this is good for companies. Multiple reasons. The first reason is in a work from anywhere model, you can hire talent globally, anywhere.
Of course.
Because now you don't need an office to hire programmers in Kenya or option traders in Hungary, or you name it. You can go and find talent wherever talent is. The second reason is talent is more loyal, and I found that in my research. In the US Patent Office, where I looked, the attrition of talent went down dramatically because now people were in their favorite location. There were less constraints on dual career situations. There were less constraints because of immigration. The third thing is productivity can go up, and I actually found that in the US Patent Office setting. Productivity went up by 4.4%. You can also build a much more inclusive workforce. I think this is critical because there's decades of research which has shown that women especially have suffered because of dual career situations. They are often not able to take promotions because that promotion will, you have to move to Dublin or London for that promotion, and your spouse doesn't want to move. In work from anywhere, you don't have to do that. So you're building a much more inclusive workforce. And the final thing I'll say is that in a work from anywhere model, there's significant cost savings. You don't need real estate to the extent you need. You don't need physical offices to the extent you need. You don't need admin costs, overhead costs. And here's the key question. What can you do with that cost savings? Can that impact your pricing model? Can now, because you don't need as a young company tons of real estate, you raise less capital. So does more stock stay with the promoters? And I can go on and on with examples. But I think conceptually, it's good for employees and good for companies.
Absolutely, that's fascinating. And tell me, Professor, you mentioned an uplift in relation to productivity. Is that in any way relates whether employees actually picked their own work setting or not at all, or that wasn't part of your research?
No, employees got to choose where they want to live.
Right.
Instead of, and I'll tell you why productivity goes up. So in the US Patent Office, which actually implemented work from anywhere in 2012, if you can believe it.
Yeah, very much ahead of the curve there.
Very much ahead of the curve. And I studied it in 2015.
Sure.
I found that productivity went up 4.4%. And the reason it went up was twofold. One, there was a very practical reason that if now a young employee could move from Alexandria, Virginia, which is relatively expensive to live, to a smaller town, which is much more cheaper, they kept the salaries constant. So employees had more real income. They had more money in their pocket. And I've heard stories of young employees with young families now being able to afford daycare, which they couldn't do before. And that just makes you productive. But then there's this loyalty argument that since I'm in my favorite location, I'm back with my parents, or I'm in a location where I love the food or the climate, we found that we measured effort by how many cases they filed every week, and we found effort went up. So work from anywhere only works when you let people choose where to live.
And you know what? You just actually said something very interesting, because you said that productivity went up measured in effort, did you say? Number of cases. So not necessarily like maybe the old way of looking at it, how many hours is, my employee sitting in front of their screen, but you said like real time measured productivity in terms of effort put into doing your job correctly. Am I right?
That is right. So I think in the new world of work from anywhere, the input, how much time I stare at a screen is immaterial, and companies should not be measuring that. I'll actually say something more nuanced. You could be measuring that, but managers should never see that and use that data to judge someone's productivity. So managers should only use output measures, the quality of work, feedback from customers, internal or external, to measure productivity. The time you spend in front of a computer screen, that data should only be seen by people from the wellness team. If Raj is working like too late every night, then I should get a call from someone in the wellness team saying, hey, what's going on? You need to stop this. You need to take breaks. You need to get an exercise regime. But it should not be used for my promotion decisions or pay raise.
Okay. Well, you touched on something actually really interesting. I wanted to, I'll bring that question earlier in the conversation only because you said that. So am I right to think that essentially the whole transition, because most organizations, whether they trialed because they were forced through pandemic into moving into all remote or majority remote, they'll have to look at obviously trying to implement that kind of all remote or majority remote or remote first setting or hybrid work. They have to essentially, am I right, am I picking the right note in what you just said? They have to actually, first of all, look at how their leaders adapt to that kind of a solution. It's less about the people, it's first about leaders being able to measure their workers correctly and interact with them correctly. So the first move is actually at the leadership level, they have to rewire their brains a little bit in a way.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. So the leaders are the shining example that everyone follows. So I'll say a few things here. The first thing is that in a majority remote model, if all the junior people are working remotely, but the C-suite is still coming to an office to work every day, then all the middle managers will show up in the physical office because they want FaceTime, and the whole model will break. So here's what I would suggest. I would suggest as we transition now into this new world with vaccines and everything, there are two critical exercises to perform in the C-suite. One is to convince the C-suite why work from anywhere is a good model for that company. What is the business case? And every company, it's slightly different. For some, it's global talent. For some others, it's real estate savings. For some others, it's inclusion. But build your business case. And the second thing is, once you've convinced why it's a good idea, then it's about how do we implement this. It's an organizational transformation project. It's about changing how we measure productivity, how we communicate, how we socialize, how do we build our culture. All of this is possible, but it has to have intent. There has to be intent from the top to change these processes.
Okay, very good. And that actually brings me to the next question nicely that I want to ask you, because you mentioned in a few of your podcasts that I looked up before and your articles that remote first is more about the actually transition for most of the organizations, and you distinguish like 5 pillars that have to actually happen, or kind of the organization have to look at in order to implement the change correctly. Can you kind of briefly guide us through, like, what are the key pillars that every organization should look at prior to kind of jumping into remote first or hybrid model?
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is that all of my insights are coming from years of research with not only cutting-edge startups. I've looked at startups like GitLab and Zapier and Doist, which are all remote. They have no offices. But I've also looked at very traditional large companies like TCS, Tata Consulting Services, which has 500,000 employees globally. I've looked at Goldman Sachs. I've looked at EXP, which is a real estate company, and is all remote. So very traditional sectors, very traditional industries. So I think what are the best practices for hybrid? Because, many companies will live in the hybrid world, not the all remote world. I respect that. So I think the principles of hybrid that I really think are the best principles are the following. One, it has to be uniform. You cannot create 2 classes of citizens. You cannot create the office workers and the remote workers. That's a disaster, because then these office workers won't share information and social ties with the remote workers, and the whole organization will suffer. So you have to make it uniform. And one of the good examples of how that is possible is to delegate this decision of how much hybrid we want to be to the team. Okay. Because every team can decide for its own which days of the week we should come. Should we come 1 week a month? And for the rest of the 3 weeks work from anywhere? Should we come for a few weeks in the year and then just disperse and every team can decide on that. And when I say the team, because the day I'm coming to the office, I want ideally my entire team to be there so that we can wine and dine, we can socialize, we can really get to know each other. So make this uniform, let teams decide. I think that's the first generalizable principle I would state. The second is rethink how you socialize. Because in the old physical office, people reminisce about the water cooler conversations, but the research shows that those water cooler conversations are only with people on the same office floor that you are in. You rarely have water cooler conversations with people in different floors. Forget different buildings. And your company is not one floor of one building. Of course, yeah. Your company is globally distributed. The way to reimagine this is to orchestrate virtual water coolers, where you can cut through the hierarchy of the firm. You can bring the CEO with interns. You can cut through the functional boundaries. So you can have product marketing, R&D, and engineering all on the same water cooler car. And there's a lot of detail behind that I've written about. So rethink socialization, rethink how to think about the culture of the organization. The third thing I would say is that it is critical to codify knowledge, really critical to codify knowledge. Because now there's less opportunity to tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, how do I do this? Of course, yeah. You need to write down. It's absolutely the heart of the remote work practice, that this code book has to be written, updated in real time. We don't like documenting, but that's the reality of the remote work. So that's my third suggestion. The fourth suggestion is you can embrace a mix of synchronous and asynchronous communication tools. So one thing I've observed is that people are tired of Zoom. And you don't need to be on a Zoom call, or you don't need to be in a conference room for everything. A lot of work can be done on asynchronous tools like Slack and Doist. And the reason I think it's better is because that allows for more quiet time where we can think and we're not always reacting in the minute. And so that's also a practice change. And the final thing is productivity. We've already spoken about it, that now you need to measure productivity at the output level, not the input. So those were my 5 pillars.
Okay, no, very, very interesting. And in your research as well, I read that you distinguished not only benefits of remote first or hybrid work when it comes to individuals, like having more time or geographical choice, and businesses, like potentially productivity or offices cost and things like that. But you actually identified something a little bit I'd say deeper, like some benefits that stretch more into kind of a greater society. What would they be? What did the research tell you?
Yeah. So I'll go to there just in a minute, but there's so much jargon in this new world. I really want to clarify for people because it's a really important conceptual point. So I just want to talk about what is remote first, okay?
Okay.
So because some people may have heard the term, they don't exactly know what it means. The way I think about remote first is, so I said when the team goes to the office, everyone should go to the office. That should be the norm, right? But you're still working with other teams which may not be in the office that day. Mm-hmm. So what working remote first means is that even the days you are in an office, because your team decided to be, you still have to behave like a remote worker, which means all meetings have to be on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, or you cannot just grab a conference room in the corner and start writing on the whiteboard and not share it with the world.
Of course.
You still have to participate in virtual water coolers. You still have to codify and write down knowledge. So even in the days you're coming to an office, behave like a remote worker. That's working remote first. So I just wanted to clarify that for your audience.
Absolutely. Just simply don't be selfish, include everybody.
That's right. But you raised a great question, and that's the reason I really got excited about working from anywhere about 5 or 6 years back. And the reason is, this is a work practice that can literally change the world. In what way? We have experienced decades of growth in mega cities. So talent has left smaller towns, talent has left smaller countries, and all gravitated to these mega hubs. And the problem is that the mega hubs are congested. There's traffic problems. The real estate is extremely expensive. To afford like a 2-bedroom apartment in London or San Francisco is really crazy. And the smaller towns and the smaller countries have suffered brain drain. But in work from anywhere, now if you let people choose where to live, they can go back to the smaller towns. They can go back to their own countries, revitalizing these local economies. And I've done work with an organization called Tulsa Remote. Tulsa is, as you know, a small city in Oklahoma in the US. It has suffered a lack of talent for decades. And in 2018, they started a program where they said, if you are a remote worker and you relocate to Tulsa, we'll pay you $10,000.
Okay.
They had 10 slots. They got 10,000 applications.
Oh, wow.
And now this model has been replicated in Arkansas, in Kansas, in Arizona. And there's a broader phenomena, which is the digital nomads phenomena. So these young millennials want to travel around the world, but still work. They're not tourists. So they go to a different country, stay there for 6 months or a year, and they're still working for Google or Facebook. And many countries, including Estonia, have issued digital nomad visas. I know Italy is trying to do that. Part of Italy is trying to do that. UAE has done it. Barbados has done it. So it's a great opportunity for smaller towns to get talent back, and for different countries. So if you have great locations in Ireland, I encourage the mayors and the community in these small towns to make a business case for why remote workers should come and live there.
Brilliant. That's really exciting, because as you said at the very beginning, this is pretty much our opportunity to reshape the way the work is done on a global scale. That's really interesting. But I'm sure that in your research it surfaced that while there are all the benefits to be seen, there must be some kind of space for challenges. I mean, nothing good happens for free in a way. You always have some speed bumps on the road. So what would be the main concerns that surface in your research? And more importantly, how were they overcome by organizations that you did talk to?
So once again, the challenges are really about not managing the organizational change well. So if you are still stuck in that old physical world of how you communicate, how you socialize, this model will not work. And so that really needs leadership. It's a management problem. It's a leadership problem. And I've been working with CHROs all over the world who are taking that leadership role in saying, we will change the way we measure productivity. We will change the way we communicate. We will not do a Zoom call for everything. We will try the synchronous communication. We will try to institute universal knowledge codification, documentation. So that change needs to be managed. And one of the sort of interesting things that's happened is this head of remote position has emerged. In some cases, the CHRO herself is the head of remote, but sometimes, like my friend Darren Murph at GitLab, he's the formal head of remote in that organization. And so that community is spreading the best practices between organizations now.
Very good, very good. And then I just wanted to ask, in your opinion, whether it's more kind of evolution and revolution that we should look at as businesses when it comes to either mostly remote or all remote setup. Because you were saying that it's probably easier to implement the change if you're starting a new business from scratch, because there is no history, there is no past behaviors to overcome. It might be a little bit more difficult when it comes to organizations that actually need to change things. So I was reading about your research that you've done with the US Patent Office, and these guys seem to be very well organized and like very prescripted. Like there was a sequence of events that had to be fulfilled before they allowed the employees to transit completely to work from anywhere. Do you find that works better, just to have like a multifaceted kind of like a ladder in a way that an employee has to sort of tick boxes or climb before they are themselves reassured that work from anywhere is actually for them and it's going to work? Or are we able to maybe, kind of slowly but surely evolve into something like that?
So I think that is what the patent office did, right? They put like these phases. They said office worker was, of course, what they did till 2007. And 2007, they tried work from home. And then they said 2012, we'll do work from anywhere. But I don't think you have to do this stepwise. And the best example of that, and I've already published a case study on this, is TCS, this Indian IT giant, which had multiple campuses all over the world, lots of real estate. They have 500,000 employees, and they took a decision to be 75% remote. So what that means is every employee will now be, starting March last year, only in the office for 25% of their time. But that decision of when the employee will be in the office will be taken by each team. Mm-hmm. So some teams could say, we'll come in 2 days a week. Some teams might say, we will come only 1 week a month. And some teams will say, we'll come in these 5 weeks in June and July, and then we'll not come. We'll just like be wherever we want to be. So they have delegated that responsibility to the team. They've done it one shot. And this is as large and complex an organization as you can find. And I find that experiments very stimulating and inspiring.
Very good, very good. And then one theme that I think that comes through the whole Talent Summit today is being very, very mindful of culture and values. And culture may be seen as a glue that gels the organizations. And all the delegates today and all the speakers were mentioning that this is core. This is like the most important thing to make sure that organizations move on successfully through this. So in your research, have you seen organizations successfully implementing or communicating culture when it comes to remote workers or work from anywhere? Because that must be surely more difficult than, I mean, it's way easier to, attend some kind of an event or, meet your boss face to face and kind of learn about the culture of the business from them. have you come across any particular examples or really good examples to share with our audience here of how that should be or could be done? Hello, Raj, can you hear me there? I think we might have temporary difficulties there, or we might be losing Raj a little bit. Hello, Raj? I'm not quite sure whether we will be able to reconnect with Raj. We might give it another very quick go.
So I'm back.
Are you back? Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Yes. Hello,
Okay.
Raj. Sorry.
No, cool. So, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. So, yes, I have thought about the culture question. It's a very important question. So I'll offer you my quick reflections. So I think the mistake is to think about culture as the physical office.
Of course.
Culture is not the cafeteria. It's not the gym in the office. It's not the cool beanbags in the office. Culture is about, so I'll say two things. One is culture is about conversations. It's about values. And it's about the networks we build. So on the networks and the conversations point, I feel remote does much better.
Right.
Because as we discussed, in the physical office, we only talk to people on our floor. In remote, you can talk to anyone.
True.
If we don't have the physical cubicles, can you reimagine how the office might look like? We might have much bigger spaces to co-mingle when we are in office together. Because the cubicles that we all are sitting in is really making that space very inefficient. So instead, you can put a band room, you can put a wonderful bar in the open area, you can really co-mingle. But the most important thing is values. So I'll give you one specific example. You asked for examples. Mm-hmm. So GitLab has this stated value of transparency. And the way they prove that transparency is to make their code book, where they write down everything about how the company works, how they hire, where they look for talent, everything. They made that code book public.
Okay.
Anyone in the world can go and read that code book. So if I'm joining GitLab and I hear the CEO say transparency is our value, I believe that because I see that in the actions. So I feel culture is not about cafeteria and office. You can do much better reimagining the office, but culture is about virtual water coolers, having a much bigger network in the company rather than the 5 people on my floor who I meet every day for lunch. And culture is about values. And we can totally do much better on that dimension in the remote world.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, time is against us, Raj, but I'd like to ask you one final question. So if any of our delegates today is still like maybe a little bit doubtful how to start the transition or where to start, I mean, because I don't think that anybody needs to be convinced that this is the time to actually, not even dip your toe into remote work, but actually go full steam at it. But if somebody's not sure where to start, what would you say that the first thing they should do when they, let's say, come into the office or log in tomorrow freshly eyed in the morning? What would be the first thing that you would advise for them to do? Where to start?
So 2 things I would say. The first thing is we should stop imagining that the world can go back to 2019. We should stop time traveling. And the risk is if you force the world to go back to 2019, then your competitors may not, and you might lose your best talent next year. So that's why do not put your faces in the sand, embrace remote. And I think the first place to start is to go through the 10 organizational processes that I talk about in my Harvard Business Review article and think about that systematically, communicate the new policy with the organization, and then really show that shining example of the leadership living that new policy.
Fantastic. Raj, thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us and taking time, no doubt, from your really, really busy day. So thanks a million. Raj Choudhury, Assistant Professor, Harvard Business School. Thanks a million. Enjoy the rest of your day.